Welcome back to another episode of Baxter's Buzz. I am Baxter E. Hall. Welcome to my brain. Welcome to my frequency. Enter at your own risk. Now, today I have my friend with me, Fran, um, nonprofit founder and author of Perversion of Love, Crystal Wright Adams. Hello, Crystal. How are you?
Hey, Baxter. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Well, thank you for finding some time. I'm glad we were able to get something on the calendar and talk about this amazing book. Before we went on air, I was just mentioning that I spent a ton of time catching up with a friend this weekend, and I was like talking about your book. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna buy. I was talking about him and my other, but I said, I'm just gonna buy y'all books. I'm just gonna buy both of y'all books and send them to y'all because I think it's important. It's very transparent, and you gave up a lot of yourself, and showed a lot of vulnerability, and it was well written too. So salute.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you for talking about it with other people. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things. um, there's books that you read or things that you read that you can't go back after you can't unsee it, you know. And when we when we connected, the book wasn't complete yet,
No.
or maybe it was complete, but it was close to being complete.
Right.
And you were telling me about the premise of the book, Perversion of Love, and so share the premise and like the backstory and what gave you the idea to write on this topic.
Yeah. So the premise of the book is that a lot of people are familiar with the 5 love languages. It's been popularized by Dr. Gary Chapman. And the premise is that as a Christian, I believe that we've been given a great commission, which is to go and spread the gospel. And I believe the mechanism by which we spread the gospel is by the greatest commandments, which are to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And so, what I see as the biggest obstacle for Christians as spreading the gospel of Jesus is that love your neighbor part.
Mm.
I think human beings in general, but even Christians struggle with that. And I believe one of the reasons they struggle is because it's hard for us to really come to a place where we love ourselves.
Mm.
And I think that the place that the struggle to love ourselves originates is in the parent-child relationship.
Mm.
And so I use the 5 love languages to kind of tell the story of how the love or lack of love, or in this case, perversion of love that you needed as a child was used as a tool from the enemy to change your perspective of what love really is and how that can affect different generations within your family.
Mm. Yeah, that's a powerful thought. There's a lot of layers to that. So the issues, I think most of us believe that if we don't have true like love and appreciation for ourselves, that it's going to be hard to like truly like love others. Do you feel like um the issues or some of the issues, or like how many of the issues do you believe that we have with ourselves as far as insecurities or lack of love, like stem from that parent-child relationship?
I'm not going to say that 100% of them do, but I would say a very large percentage do. And matter of fact, the reason this book even came about, first of all, I want you to know that I never considered myself an author. When I felt the Lord telling me that I was to write this book, I was like, Who, me? Like, sir, sir, can we have a powwow? Because this is not, what I'm here for. And it really came about because I had a group of girlfriends. We have a group chat. We would talk in all the time. And we kind of got on this topic of the 5 love languages, which we're all familiar with. But I started to see through each of their stories and what they had identified as their primary love language, how the enemy had very clearly, to me, attacked them in that same area as a child. And the obstacles and the hurdles that they were facing as adults that were a direct correlation of that. So I think that it doesn't have to necessarily be your parents, but whoever your primary caretaker or guardian was. And I do want to stress that I don't think that a lot of the times it's intentional or even like malicious. But as I stated earlier, it's a generational thing. And so if their parents and the relationship they had with them perverted their perspective of love, and they don't heal from that, when they have kids, that cycle continues and continues and continues.
Yeah, it's funny. I think about it often about, we're just trying to do the best we can, raising these kids. We don't know what we're doing. We feel like we have a pretty good grasp, and in areas that we're broken or blind spots that we have, we are still going to have them when we're trying to rear our children. And my niece Tiana, she'll say on occasion, I just really hope we're not screwing up our kids too much. I think as we get older, we gain that wisdom. We're like, man, there's a lot of stuff that we're doing wrong, and we can only teach the kids what we know, right? And so I had a good conversation with my mother-in-law a few days ago, who I love dearly, and we were just talking about resources that my wife and I have now that our parents didn't have, and then their parents didn't have, right? And so I said, we want to do better. We want to use the resources that we have. And, she felt like she needed to defend her parents, more so than herself. And it was like, no, they didn't, nobody's all bad. But when we're misinformed or we don't have enough information, we act on that lack of information. And when we have more, we know better, we gotta do better, right? Talk about what you've learned from being, from sort of living in a household. Could you talk about your relationship with your mom and your stepdad, right? Talk about what you've learned and some of the things that you've taken, as you become a parent and you raise your own children.
Yeah, well, and I completely agree with you. I think part of, especially the generations that came before us, there wasn't an emphasis or a value placed on being open and vulnerable and transparent. It was very much what happens in this house stays in this house. We don't talk about it. We all see it, but we don't talk about it, right? And unfortunately, I believe it keeps people trapped in these cycles of repeating the same thing. And it may not be the same exact manifestation of the cycle, but it's the same cycle, right? The root of it is the same. And so I'll say, like, to me, he's my dad. And I don't think I make it clear in the book, but, when he and my mother got married, he adopted us. So as far as I'm concerned, that's my dad. But I do realize I have a biological father out there who was not involved in my life. And I think that what we endured in childhood with him, and even what we watched our mom endure, was a result of the cycles that they were born into,
Absolutely.
right? And so because there's this, we don't talk about it and we don't acknowledge it, right? How can you ever begin to change something that you don't, have the, I want to say courage, because I'm not finding a better word right now, but the courage to acknowledge and say, and you can say it and say, I did the best I could, but now I know better, I do better, right? To your point. And
That's
so
right.
I think for me, it was so important ultimately to write this book because I realized very early on in my parenting of my sons that I was starting to repeat some of the same cycles and behaviors that I had grown up with. And I knew I hated growing up like that. It did not
Mm-hmm.
feel good. It did not make me feel like I was loved, valued, cared for, any of those things. And I didn't want my children to feel that way, but I didn't know how to change it. And so for me, I think I prayed, I asked for God to show me a different way. And honestly, even through writing this book, he was still refining me and showing me a different way. Because
Sure.
as I'm writing, I mean, I've read the five love languages. I've read the five love languages of children prior to this. But it's not until you're in there doing the work that it starts to really connect, at least for me. And so I really had to be intentional and say, okay, this is my son's love language. This is what I've identified by his behaviors and how he interacts with me. And it's not the same as mine. And so it's hard. It's not natural or easy for me to just give them love in that way because it's not the way that I receive love. And most of us give love in the way we want to receive it,
Right.
right? And so it takes acknowledging, like, hey, I want to change this thing. And then two, being intentional. Okay, now I have to put in the work to give my child love in the way that they need to receive it so that they do feel love and they have that confidence and that security that their mother loves them no matter what. That doesn't mean that they don't still get disciplined. That doesn't mean that there aren't still boundaries and rules. It's a balance, like everything is. But if I want to end the cycle or at least start to shift it in a different positive direction, then I have to be able to acknowledge it first and then be intentional about doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I one of my first jobs, um, I was my manager at the time was like complaining about this mess, like this organization. And he just said nobody, like it's been this way for years and they won't fix it. And my naive self, I said, well, why don't they fix it? And he said, because people, if they have to take time to fix it, they feel like it'll take too much time to like reorganize. Like it's better to just figure these workarounds, right? And that's
Mm.
what we do in our lives, in our relationships. We figure out these workarounds and we say ridiculous stuff like, well, that's just the way I am.
Yeah,
And we make excuses for other people. Oh, that's just the way they are, like, you know, and we don't hold ourselves accountable and we don't give ourselves that we don't have that courage to start to change, how we're parenting or how we're communicating in these relationships because it feels like a lot of work.
it is work. That's the
Yeah,
thing. I think the reason people do that is because that's what they've seen their whole lives as an example as well, right? You don't
for
speak
sure.
unless you're spoken to. You don't question what an adult does. You don't bring yourself to, skill of one of your elders or talk back or disrespect, right? And there's a lot of thoughts and feelings I have on that we'll save for another podcast. But I say all that to say, like, I've heard you and I, again, we're both a fan of Darius Daniels, my friend Jerry Flowers in Houston. Both of them have said that a lot of times when you're in a situation where you feel frustrated by it, that and you don't see a solution being executed or change happening, most likely God put you there to be the person to change that situation, right? And so I think about that as I apply it to this book and what I experienced in childhood, what I know my parents experienced in childhood, and what was happening as a parent for my children. And with me, it was my second son. I like to call it the second son syndrome or the second child syndrome, because that second one be, bruh, like they be the one that God sent to make you a better human being. And they can be testing every limit that you have.
Yeah, for sure.
Children, but that's a different book. But but I was so my first son is so much like me, personality wise, that I never, if I not had my second son, I don't think I ever would have changed my parenting style. I wouldn't have had to. He was so much like me, very compliant, a people pleaser, things like that. Just you say it, he does it, right? My second son is like, why? And for what purpose? And why can't we, right? And the way I grew up was because I said so, open your mouth again and see what happens, right? If you even got a why out. And what I had to realize is I knew I didn't want to have the intensity of strictness that I grew up in for my kids, but I didn't know how to create that balance of still having boundaries and rules and discipline without going all the way over to that other side of the spectrum. And so I use that as, that was God frustrating me. Like, yeah, there's a reason why this is happening, and you need to come to me to figure out how we change that. And that's kind of another basis of the book that we had. And I think that through that experience, parenting my youngest son, I was then able to go back to my older son and look at him and say, okay, you know, he's the easy bake oven child. He's the rotisserie chicken thing, set it and forget it. You know what I'm talking about? He's that kid. But then I start to analyze it a little bit more. Okay, he's just like me. And what did I do when I was a kid? I didn't get the affirmation I needed. So I had to people please. And I tried to make everybody like me. And I tried, you know, and to me, that's almost more dangerous than this wild child over here that's getting me and my life together, is letting a cycle repeat to where my son is dealing with the same issues that I dealt with because he's not getting what he needs from me. Because he's so worried about pleasing me that he would rather please me and me be happy with him than to demand, you know, as much as a child can demand from a parent what he needs from me.
Sure. So there's a couple of different things that I want to unpack a little bit. One of the things you talked about was like the household, and like what happens in this house stays in this house. That's a whole other book for me, because there were just things that, you know, I knew wasn't regular. But I think about it in the sense of like almost how it was taboo to like discuss your salaries with your coworkers, where there are times, whether it's parents of similar, you know, or like friends that, and you guys have children and you're raising people and you have relationships just in general, and you have these frustrations and you realize, oh, I'm not the only one dealing with it. But if you didn't open up your mouth, you wouldn't have ever sort of known, right? And I think that there's a vulnerability there where it's a tough sort of hill to climb, because you open yourself up. It kind of like you're not airing your dirty laundry, but you're kind of saying like, my house isn't as together as you may think. And ultimately, nobody's house is, right? And if we can't get past that, if we can't get over ourselves, we're not going to be able to properly equip ourselves to be able to like help each other kind of get through these things, whether it's friends, whether it's, you know, true therapy with like a therapist or a counselor. We need to open up our you know, open up those doors and share what's going on so that we can try to correct some of this behavior, some of these patterns that are
Right.
generational many times, right?
Absolutely. I completely agree. From a spiritual standpoint, the Bible says it. We overcome the enemy, the evil one, by the blood of the Lamb, which is, Jesus Christ. If that's what you believe, that's what I believe. Jesus is the brand. And the word of our testimony. And so what the enemy wants is for us to not be talking, is to not be sharing our story because we feel like we'll be embarrassed, because like we're not living up to a societal ideal of perfection or success or whatever it is. And at the end of the day, I think that you and I can both agree that the people who are vulnerable and courageous enough to be transparent, and those are the ones that we tend to think of as being the most authentic, the most real people, because it's like, dang, you going through the same thing I'm going through. And that brings a common ground between us to where we can talk about these things. Again, another scripture says, confess your sins one to another and pray for each other, so that you may be healed, because the effectual fervent prayer of the righteous availeth much. So it may not be sins necessarily, right? But it can just be confessing those things, man, like, I ain't got it. I don't know how to talk to this kid. Somebody help me. Or this is something I'm struggling with. I need your prayer. I need your support, encouragement. And I know that for me personally, it was a combination of all of those things. Being able to have that support system through my sisterhood, being able to have that support system through therapy, which I'm a huge proponent of. And I think that we're living in a time where there's like a cultural shift to a degree, where before the things that were taboo to talk about now are kind of out in the open. And I think that's a result of all of the hurt and the hypocrisy and other things that we saw growing up that affected us generationally. And we're like, nah, they swept that under the rug, and I know what that felt like. And I saw the results of that. I got to do something different. So it's a slow shift, and of course you have to be discerning in what you share and who you share it to.
Of course, yeah.
Not everybody is your friend. Not everybody is there for your good. But in this book, the stories that I did share, I believe, are what needed to be shared to highlight the patterns and how the enemy tries to attack a family for generations. And I think that as tough as some of them may be to read or even think about, unfortunately, I think they're very relatable to a lot of people.
Sure. So tell me about those decisions to share some of those things in the book that were very personal, not just about yourself, but people in your life, right? To sort of provide that transparency. What was your thought process around that? Did you have any reservations, apprehension?
Absolutely. We gonna keep it 1,000. Yes. Man, listen, I'm not a very anxious person, Baxter. You already know.
Right.
But when I say I was anxious and nervous about this, and this is another reason why it probably took me so long to get this little 50-page book out, because, and I don't want to diminish it's a little 50-page book, because this is what the Lord gave me to share, and it's small, but it's going to do what God, purpose for it to do. But yeah, I was very nervous. There were some people that I was more nervous than others about, but I will say that prior to me sending the book to the publisher, when I finished and I got to the place where my manuscript was where I wanted it to be to send it to the publisher, I did send the person who was involved, included in the book, their portion of the book to read. And man, I even saw God move in that, to be quite honest with you. So I know it's what he called me to do. And at the end of the day, the Lord worked all of it out to where, we moved forward with the project. There were some people who were like, hey, maybe, clean me up a little on how I remember things, right? And I was open to that. I was like, yeah, I mean, I realized that I remember it from my perspective. So let's have a conversation about it. There were some people who didn't talk to me for a very long time after they read their portions of it. And there were some people who just wrote back and said, man, yeah, that's exactly how it happened, you know?
Well, because yeah, first of all, where you are on your journey may not be where they are yet, right? And they may not want to, you may be hitting the fast forward button on them, and they're like, hold on now, this ain't. I'm not even ready to deal with any of this, right? I thought about that. I said, "Woo, she then said a few things. I wonder how it affected relationships and everything."
Yeah.
So can we just briefly talk about the five love languages? Just so can you go through what they are?
Sure. Yeah, so there's words of affirmation. Do you want me to like give you an example or just tell you
Nope,
the,
just
okay.
yeah.
So we have words of affirmation, we have acts of service, gifts, physical touch, and I always forget quality time, which is mine. Why do I forget that every time? I don't know. But quality time. Yeah, those are the five love languages.
So so my next question was, what's your love language? It's quality time. And then your two boys.
Yeah, so so I have two that are tied for the first place, I guess you could say, the top two love languages, and then one that's like just under that. And so like if you
You can't
read,
have all the love languages.
but you can though, that's the thing, is that if you read Gary Chapman's book, the ideal is that you become balanced to a place where you're able to receive and give love equally in all of those languages.
Sure.
That's kind of the idea, right?
Sure.
But there's definitely ones that you're going to have more of a proclivity towards. And so when I was growing up, it was absolutely words of affirmation. Like I lived and breathed on the affirmation of others. And that's why it was so, critical that it had such a critical impact on me when I didn't get what I needed from the source that I needed it from.
Mm-hmm.
As an adult, I think honestly, a symptom of what I went through in childhood is it evolved to where even though words of affirmation is technically my second highest ranked love language, it doesn't hold as much weight for me anymore because I've seen it perverted, which is the topic of the book, so many times that now it's like, you got to show me better than you can tell me, that's where I'm at. With my sons, I would say I identify two that are most prevalent in each of them. And for each of them, one of them is easy for me to give, and the other one is something I have to be very intentional about giving. So with my oldest son, it's words of affirmation. I'm sorry, with him, it's quality time and physical touch. And physical touch is like the lowest of mine. Mm-hmm. And so like, unless we get down to business, like, the way Jesus intended when he created Adam and Eve, I'm like, I'm not really here for people touching me, okay? And so it's something that I have to be so intentional about. Like sometimes I'll just call him into my room and just give him a hug, right? Yeah. There's times where we'll be sitting on the couch and he got his feet all on me, and like I'm like inside cringing, like, get your feet off me, child. But on the outside, I'm like, okay, baby, rub your leg or something. He needs that. With my younger son, the one that struggled, he's words of affirmation for sure, but acts of service. And one thing I had to realize, like with him, he always asked me to help him do everything. And I'm like, son, you can do this. Like you can do this by yourself. And I had to really understand that there has to be a balance from me in what I choose to help him with and what I say you can do it yourself. Because since his love language is acts of service, if I deny him help, it creates more of a negative impact in him than it would someone else whose love language is an acts of service. I tell my older son, hey, you can do it, go do it yourself. Bet, he's off to the races. I tell my younger son, hey man, you can do this. And to him, I'm telling him, you're not worthy of me helping you. You're not worthy of my time and energy. And that's where those cycles and those patterns are born and get, perpetuated.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, many times us as people that happen to be parents, that happen to have relationships, spouses, business partners, coworkers, whatever, we aren't as equipped to know these things, right? To know what our love languages are, let's say, or be tapped into someone else's, and how to properly sort of deal with them. And it's like, once we have that information, we gotta do better. We have to do better. I know you mentioned it. I just want to say, yeah, yo, little 50-page. This thing is it's heavy in the sense of it's it's rich. It may not be 300 pages, but the content is so important and so relatable on so many different levels. As you think about it from a Christian standpoint, you think about it as a communicator or just a person just trying to figure things out, and you start to look at your life, you start to look at the people around you now, and it can sort of like send you down a number of different sort of places between like where you came from, where you are, and it's potent. It's potent.
I like that.
Yeah, it's the old folks say it's potent. It's it's so it's a fast read because it's so relatable, but it's like it's one that, like I said earlier, you're not going to be able to sort of unsee, because you're going to start to understand how these things are affecting you today.
Yes.
The last book that impacted me, um, let me be careful because I don't want to be all full of hyperbole, but we talked about Relational Intelligence by Dr. Darius Daniels. That one was a game changer for me because it allowed me to remove like guilt about some of my relationships that I was holding on to, or the category was they were mislabeled, and it also allowed me the freedom to like let things go and to sort of put my expectations like in its proper place. Your book made me, it held a mirror up to me and how I was dealing with my children and how I continue to deal with my children. How I deal with my wife, how my parents dealt with me, how, like, and how all these things are connected. And so it's tough as you learn more about yourself. I've gone through this journey, and what I've learned more than anything is, damn, I was really scared. Damn, I've been so afraid of all these different things, right? And then you start to see it in other people. It's like, oh, I remember when I used to act like that. They just scared. They just don't know. You know what I mean? You have that empathy, sympathy at that point, for folks where you just can kind of, but when I think about your book, I think about the ways that people are motivated and some of their motives and why they're moving us the way that they're moving. It's because of their love language, and because they sometimes are trying to cheat the system, or they're trying to get more of this, or they're trying to shower you with their love language to get what they want, not whatever it may be. So it's like it's a book that I could honestly say the first time I read it, I haven't been able to like move on from it. It's like a part of the fabric now.
Well, thank you. First of
Yeah.
all, thank you for saying that. Secondly, to be mentioned in the same breath as Dr. Darius Daniels, that's like, okay, Jesus, you can sit, go ahead and sit, come on down, sir, because I'm ready. No, I'm just joking. I'll agree with you. Dr. Darius Daniels, man, he is an amazing teacher of the Word of God, and not just the Word of God, but how consequential relationships are in the kingdom of God and in the world in general. And he is one of my favorite teachers. And I listen to him regularly. So thank you for that. And I definitely agree. I don't think I understood how deep and cyclical and generational this concept was, until I started reading the book. I'll be honest with you and say that though I had arrived at a place with my dad where I felt like I had forgiven him, and it was what it was, I don't think I truly understood why he operated the way he did until I started writing this book. And I think you're absolutely right. Even with my ex-husband, all the things that we've gone through, to this day, if there's something that happens that kind of reminds me of that old behavior or those old experiences that I had with them, I almost immediately go to, man, I understand why. Now, that being said, with any person, at a certain age and at a certain state in life, it has to be your responsibility to move on from that, right? And to be, like you say, better, do better. But I think so many people get trapped in a place where they can't even identify or acknowledge that this is why I'm moving this way. That if you can't start with that step one, it's going to be very hard, I'll say impossible, to move forward with changing the rest of it. So that's exactly why God had me write this book. It was a mirror to me, writing it and reading it when I've had to read it. I think it's been a mirror to many people who have read it. And it's not intended to make you feel bad or make you feel less than. It's intended, it might be coming for your edges a little bit, but it's intended to give
but
you
it's productive.
A different perspective, right? And I think that, like you said, we don't know what we don't know. And if someone can read this book and now all of a sudden they're like, wow, and they see the world differently and how they move and how other people move differently, then maybe we can get to this place where we truly love ourselves, love other people, and then, get to business, spreading the word.
Yeah, no, that's real. Perversion of Love, understanding the enemy's attack on your love language. It's a book that I'm gonna move fast. I need to buy some of these so I can pass them out for the holidays, man. Like I truly think it's important, and I think that some of us are close and we're evolving. And I think that this is one of these pieces of literature that you could kind of like that can help us. Sometimes we're always so focused on what everybody else is doing. I think this gives us an opportunity to really put the focus on ourselves in a way of self-healing, self-assessment, and I think that's where that growth really starts. So I'm a super fan. Like I said, I've been mentioning it to people, not because you're my friend, but because it's a really good read, and it's so applicable to all the relationships that we have. And so thank you again. I'm proud to know you. I love the fact that we were able to meet prior to this coming out, and you talked about how God was sort of working through you and pushing you to kind of open up and be so vulnerable. Like it's theory is one thing to write about, but to talk about yourself is a whole nother ball of wax, and you did that. And I just want to say congratulations. And I'm hoping that more and more people get a chance to kind of learn about themselves as they open up the book. So
Thank you. And can I say, Baxter, that I just want to tell you how proud I am of you and all the
see,
work you've been doing on Baxter's Buzz. I know you just made 1 year,
that's
and
right. Thank you.
yes, you did. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
I think that it's important to, of course, don't drink your own Kool-Aid, but at the same time, stop and acknowledge what God is doing in and through you for the glory of himself and for the betterment of people. And I just say, like, to see you out here, especially with Baxter's Buzz, like highlighting so many people who may not have a voice otherwise or may not have a platform otherwise, including myself. So thank you so much. Who are really trying to do what they can to make this world a better place, to change people's perspectives and to give back to other people is like, it's not something that should be taken lightly. And I definitely want to make sure you understand how crucial of an impact that makes on the world. And the example that your children and your family and your wife will see from it. So congratulations.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm learning to receive those
Receive
things.
it.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so on behalf of Crystal, um, I just want to let everybody know who's listening to this or watching this that you are capable. Um, you just need to learn to embrace your own frequency. Um, Thank you so much again, Crystal. I'm looking forward to getting this in some other folks' hands and spreading a good word. So
Thank you so
thank
much.
you.
I appreciate it, Baxter.
All right. Until next time, peace.
Peace.